This comes from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, whose 6 centers in the United States, the human nutrition centers of the Department of Agriculture. Their principal one is in Beltsville, Maryland. They have one in Grand Rapids, North Dakota, and one in California, I believe. But these scientists study human nutrition in agriculture and in the population, and they've accumulated some fantastic data. But this was shocking when I first saw this. This shows the percent of the U.S. population not meeting the DRI or the RDA for specific nutrients. And look at vitamin E. 85.9% of the population don't get enough of it on a daily basis, according to the RDA. There's 68% of the population that don't get enough magnesium. There's 75.1% that don't get enough folic acid. Calcium is easy to believe. There's so much osteoporosis around that we can all believe that not very many people get enough calcium, 72.9%. There's vitamin A, 54.7% don't get enough vitamin A. There's another 5 elements there that over 30% of the population don't get enough of, and you can see that there's not a single element there that everyone in the United States gets enough of on an annual basis or on a daily basis. That leads to a little analogy that was important to me in the animal industry that we came across it. And it's called the principle of the first limiting nutrient. If you compare our body to a dam, and some of you have seen this before, but a dam holds water when it doesn't leak. And when you superimpose that deficiency chart from the U.S. Department of Agriculture on the dam and then pretend that it leaks, notice what happens to the water. The dam doesn't hold much water, does it? It's not working very effectively, and that's exactly what our body is like. When we're deficient in those elements, our body doesn't function right, and it only functions to the level of the nutrient that is the most limiting. Now, what we do in science is we come along and we do these things, manipulate a single element, like that. And then we measure what difference that made. Not a lot of difference. Now, that might be a statistically significant difference. I mean, there's a lot more water behind that dam than there was back there, right? But when you measure that scientifically, the difference you see is the difference between that level and that level. And that doesn't look too impressive. But you see, you really don't know what happens. I mean, even if you use an intervention that's partly there, it still doesn't work that well. It's not until you plug all the holes in the dam that you can see what fixing the dam really does in terms of effect. Now, scientifically, if we're going to see what a single element does, we better do this first and then take away one of those elements to see what effect a single element has. Well, whenever I see a single element intervention, you know, you always have to ask yourself, what's happening? Are you seeing a benefit, or what are you seeing? Are you seeing an effect because of the imbalance that you're creating by adding a whole bunch of a single nutrient? Or are you really seeing what that element does? You see the problem? As an old science teacher, you know, I used to teach, well, there's one variable in a scientific experiment, right? But in this particular instance, that becomes a problem. And so our investigation into these things is problematic. To some degree, when we start playing with metabolites in the body, it's the same kind of thing. So my theory is that you want to try and correct everything in the body by giving the body, like Ames says, he says that if you could supplement all 40 essential plus elements in the body, that 90% of all ill health would disappear. And there's a growing evidence to support that 90% of ill health in North America would disappear.